one of the things about Monster is the timing of that record. It came out in November of '94, which was a really good year for music, but it was a big year for sorrow because in April we lost Kurt Cobain, and that seemed to take a lot of the heart and momentum out of what people thought was a genuine revolution in American popular music. How much of the writing and development of Monster musically was a reaction to what had been going on in Seattle, in rock at the time, while you were making Out of Time and Automatic?
Well, musically, the sound was not really a reaction to Seattle in any way. It was more that Peter had he had taken his sabbatical from the electric guitar and played on mandolin and bouzouki and acoustic guitar and all that stuff, and he was ready to grab the Les Paul and the Rickenbacker again. So, at the timing of that rediscovery of the guitar and the fact that we wanted to make this really loud, raucous record, that led to the actual sound. It's why it sounds like it does. It's why the songs are what they are.
But didn't he move to the Northwest at around that point? Because Scott McCoy from the Young Fresh Fellows and all that scene, he was one of the second extra musicians on the tour.
Well, he met a woman up there and fell in love, and that'll do
He moved to Seattle to start a family and bought a house. And Kurt and Courtney bought the house next door because they wanted to be neighbors with Peter Buck. And and so those guys came into our sphere, and we started all hanging out together. And Eddie Vedder moved up from San Diego, I think, to start Pearl Jam. And they were in our sphere. And these were people that had been influenced by REM, and they were now doing their own thing. And they were
Did you recognize some of the energy in that scene from what you had seen at the beginning in Athens, Georgia?
Not really, because it was such a different. They were just as isolated in their way as Athens was in ours,
and they had a lot more rain too,
and a lot more heroin and a lot of other weird things that weren't really part of the scene in Athens. And it's a totally different nascence. The birth of what that sound and that feeling and all that they did, that was completely their own thing. And while we always admired that and did feel a kinship with it, we never really. I never felt like we were borrowing or taking from that in any way. We had a completely different approach.
Well, it's interesting because one of the things when I did that last interview with Kurt that ran in Rolling Stone was that, he very specifically cited REM as an example of how he wanted to move forward, either with Nirvana or on his own as a singer and a songwriter. And I thought at the time that he said that, I thought that was a pretty profound thing to hear from him because he was so associated as being the trigger for so much, and yet here he was actually, in many ways, probably like Tom York talking to you, looking for some kind of guidance out of this maelstrom, which he had partly created, but had also been created around him, and to some degree without his permission.
There's also creatively, I think, you go for something and you expose a part of yourself, and that becomes another creature, another character as a public figure, and or there's something that comes out of it that is not quite human, and certainly didn't represent Kurt, didn't represent me, didn't represent Tom, and I think in every one of those cases there's a point where you decide that you're going to stretch yourself further and do something different. I think Kurt was at that point. He really wanted to work on a different type of public persona, but a different type of music.
And actually the Unplugged show, which I got to see performed, was such a vivid example of what he could do in an entirely different sphere.
And I was invited, and I was supposed to be there, and for some stupid reason I didn't go. And I wish it's one of my great regrets, actually, was missing that day.
Well, it's funny, I've never watched the video because I have it in my head so vividly. I actually had a seat. There was this very high sort of riser where they had chairs, and I had a seat right at the edge, so I was like on the prow of a ship, and I'm looking down right at Kurt, and of course that sort of triangle arrangement they had, and I sat there mesmerized by the whole thing. And so when it was a video, I thought, I don't want to see the director's cut. I want to see the cut that's up in my head. And whenever I play that record, it just comes back to me with incredible detail and clarity.
I think Scott Litton mixed that, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
After Kurt passed,
When you wrote Let Me In, how much of Kurt is literally in there, and how much of it is sort of drawing from an emotional response to him, or
It's
just
all
that kind
Kurt.
of an event?
It's all Kurt. And it was not. It was completely unedited. It fell out of me so quickly, and it's a response to Mike picked up a guitar and played this angry, upset, mournful, aggressive piece of music, and someone hit play, and I heard it, and I think I wrote the lyrics in the amount of time it takes to sing them, and I didn't. I never went back and re-edited or recut. It just flew out of me like that, and so the entire song is Kurt. It's all about him, and it's all about this, wanting so desperately to help someone who's in such a dark place and feeling completely helpless, and feeling that hopelessness of no matter how much I can offer of myself, it's not going to be enough.
Mike, where did that music come from you, do you think? Was it a response to that?
I wasn't thinking about Kurt per se, but I was I call it angrily melancholic. I was really just pissed off and sad at the same time, and and I said, I'll go to my old friend the minor chord here and see what happens. And
Minor chord is always good for that.
It's always so cathartic, and that kind of came out. It just kind of flew out as well. I didn't really have to do any editing or revisiting that song. It just sort of came out as it was.